Bună dimineața și bun găsit la BU. Sunt Sabina Iosub și vă invit să rămâneți alături de mine în următoarea jumătate de oră ca să înțelegeți ce va face Parlamentul European în acest an, pe ce se va concentra, care sunt prioritățile. Today, here with me in Strasbourg, in the European Parliament, is Jean Dutch. Thank you so much for your presence.
Thanks for inviting me.
Our viewers know you very well. You are the spokesperson of the European Parliament. We are recording this discussion in the last session of 2022. Here in the European Parliament is a huge debate about things that happened in the last days, and I'm referring to the situation of Qatar corruption case. Let's call it like this. It was an immediate reaction of the European Parliament, sustaining, of course, the investigation, but it's a difficult moment.
Of course, it's a difficult moment. Since a couple of days, the attention of the whole House is pointing on this very, very sad situation. A very dangerous situation, but I must say that as an official of this House, I'm proud about the reaction of the institution. First of all, the President, since the first moment, she has been very clear and very decided in the way she's addressing this crisis, this situation, and the whole House behind. We just got the result of the vote to end the term of the vice presidency for former Vice President Kylie. It was practically unanimous, and we also have had the possibility to listen to the presidents, to the chairs of all the political groups saying more or less the same things, and all together expressing the real willingness, first of all, to clarify exactly what happened, to help justice and law enforcement, police in Belgium, and also to have a look to the internal rules of the House to see how these rules can be enhanced.
We've listened to the President of the European Parliament as a first reaction saying that the European Parliament should look into rules and see exactly how things can be better controlled, starting from this ugly moment. But will we see some reforms coming from this?
I'm pretty sure there have been discussions at the level of the Conference of Presidents, at the level of the Bureau of this House, also the plenary, a resolution adopted this same week, which came with the main lines of what the Parliament is going to do during the next months to enhance these internal rules, but also, I would say, the rules for all the European institutions, to avoid that something which in principle is logic and is natural, which is lobbying, doesn't become something completely different, doesn't become a crime, which is what in this particular case it is.
Is this a hit for the European institutions? And I'm asking you this, taking into consideration the fact that we will see in 2024 new elections for the European institutions, and I think it's important to see how this year, in 2023, things are developing in terms of trust.
I think that what is important here, or what can have an impact, and in this case a positive impact in the European elections, is the reaction of the House. I think that in these next months, this Parliament is going to show to citizens that it takes these corruption cases very, very seriously, that this is a House where corruption cannot be completely, let's say, unattended, and that at some point the whole institution knows how it has to react to make the difference between one member of the Parliament, or I don't know, couple of members of the Parliament, or staff or assistants, and the rest of the institution, which is 99% of the institution. So what is for me important here is to show this capacity to react and this capacity to improve the rules to avoid that these things happen again.
Let's focus on the priorities of the European Parliament in 2023, because I've said it's the year before the elections, it's the end of a mandate, a very difficult one. And I'm saying this because we've seen pandemic, war, energy crisis, and God knows what we'll see in 2023 also.
I think that first of all we have to take into consideration the fact that the Parliament and the whole European Union have been reacting in a very efficient and positive way to the two major crises of this legislature. First, of course, the pandemic, and second, the war, the Russian aggression against Ukraine. 2023 is probably the year where, first of all, the Parliament has to keep very, very close to the Ukrainian government and to the Ukrainian society. By the way, they got the Sakharov Prize during this last plenary session. But what they need now, what they still need is a lot of money and also all kind of humanitarian, economic and even military help. And in a way or in another, this is also one of the priorities for the European Parliament in the next year. The first priority, I would say. But of course, coupled with a second one, which is to protect the European citizens against the consequences of this war, against the consequences of what Russia is doing, for example, avoiding or difficulting the export of agriculture products from Ukraine to other countries, the prices of energy. I think that 1 year before the European elections, the European Union has again a nice opportunity to show to the citizens how efficient it can be in protecting them.
When discussing about the war in Ukraine, we, of course, are focusing on the situation of the Ukrainians and how they can be helped during these war times. But we are looking also at the member states and the impact on the European citizens, because we've agreed to reduce the dependency in terms of gas in terms of the dependency to Russia's gas. We've seen also a lot of actions taken in the last year in order to isolate Russia, to cut off the funds that are going there. But as a result, we also see an impact on the lives of the European citizens. Energy crisis, the prices that are going to I don't know, the highest level.
Yes.
What will be the addressing of the European Parliament to these situations? New rules, new packages maybe, or some other ways to help the European citizens actually?
Well, first of all, the aggression against Ukraine by the Russian government, by Vladimir Putin, is not only an aggression to Ukraine, it's also an aggression to freedom. It's an aggression to our own social and political kind of life or mode of life. So the Ukrainians are not only defending themselves against this territorial aggression, they are also defending us and defending or protecting our way of life. And I think that this is important not to be forgotten, because the essence in some way also of the reaction from the European Union and from all the member states. And now, of course, as I said before, we also have to protect citizens against the direct or indirect consequences of this war. But of course, not putting ourselves at the same level as Ukrainians. Ukrainians are paying with their lives.
Of course.
This defense of freedom, this defense of the integrity of the country. In our case, what is important now is that the European Union is able to help help with different programs, with different funds, as it was the case for COVID, as it has always been the case with the regional funds and with the energy funds, to help the citizens to pay the bills for energy, to help the small and medium companies also to cope with this increase of the energy prices. But there are many things that have been done in the last months and will be done, including by this parliament in the next months. For example, to reorient some of the money that was prepared or was still there to help member states and citizens to cope with the consequences of COVID and the pandemic, and to reallocate this money now, the money that has not been spent yet, to the real, or to the, let's say, to the more updated consequences of the crisis for citizens.
When we are discussing about the Green Deal and everything that is linked to that, we have also to look at how things evolved due to the war in Ukraine. And I think that some important discussions will be focusing on this area. Maybe some legislation has to be adapted due to the new factors.
Yes, well, you know that one of the main legislative packages of this legislature, of this 5 years term, is this Fit for 55 program, which is, let's say, the whole effort that the European Union has to do to be sure that we are able to get a real green neutrality or environmental neutrality in 2050 and most of it in 2035. But this means adopting a lot of different pieces of legislation. In 2022, the Parliament was able to negotiate with the Council part of these files. For example, during this last week, the file on batteries has been adopted by both Parliament and Council, but there is still a lot to be done in 2023. And of course, it will be a priority, and it's a priority that we have to combine also with the situation in terms of access to energy and prices of energy. But I think that most of people here, they are convinced that the importance of moving to a green policy, to a green energy policy, is even more important now in this situation than it was 1 year before.
Let's focus a little bit on migration also. We've seen in Romania a huge debate regarding the migration routes. Of course, due to the Schengen situation that you are aware of, thanks to the European Parliament, the discussion about Romania and Bulgaria that was really not okay in the JAI committee was also debated here at the European Parliament's level. When discussing about migration, it's important to see where the people are coming from, what are the routes, where are going those who cannot stay anymore in their homes, and based on these data to decide where to give the money, where to give the support.
Yes, since many years the European Parliament is trying to adopt with the Council of Ministers, always the two legislators, what we call the Migration and Asylum Pact. And in fact, the efforts of this Parliament increased enormously after the crisis of 2015 with the Syrian refugees. The problem is that even if here there is an agreement, or there can be at some point agreements around the whole pact, the difficulty is at the other side, the other institution, the Council. Why? Because some countries I would say several countries until now were not very interested in adopting this legislation. But this legislation is really necessary because, as you say, what we need is a kind of holistic approach. We have to take decisions that are coping with the different situations. First of all, of course, helping economically those countries that are sending economic migration or even sometimes refugees to Europe. If you don't solve the situation in their countries, this is going to go on and on and on, and even to worsen in the next years, also because of climate change, for example.
So trying to solve the cause, it's difficult in many situations. See Ukraine, see Syria, see Afghanistan, and a lot of other countries.
Yes, and lots of countries in Africa, but this is why we need agreements with them. We need to better include them in international trade. We have to open our borders to their products. We have to invest with our own companies in these countries. This is essential. But then, of course, at the same time, we have also to be able to put into practice a policy which is really a show of solidarity between the different member states. It's not because all the migrants reach Europe through the shores of 3, 4, 5 member states, or now from the borders with the eastern part of the continent, then other countries are in a way or in another are not affected. So we need to put into place, and this is the position of this House since many years, a system for reallocation of migrants in a way that all the countries are supporting more or less, let's say, the same level of pressure.
It is difficult to see all those people that are coming from war zones, from leaving their homes and trying to somehow restart their lives. I'm saying this because we've seen in Romania more than 3 million Ukrainians passing the border in order to try to run from the war and try to somehow protect their families, their relatives. It's very difficult, and I'm sure that during these times the European Parliament was focusing on also on the countries that helped the Ukrainians and that have border with Ukraine, Romania. We've seen the situation in Poland. What's next to be done here?
I think that we don't have to forget that migration can be a huge personal drama. Not everybody that decides to leave his or her country are doing this because they really like it. I mean, in most of times, this is just the result of a very difficult situation in their country. So they leave this migration, and even more when this migration is, let's say, illegal migration, in a very, very, very hard way. And many of them are losing their lives, for example, trying to cross the sea in very small boats or sometimes in incredible means. So this is the first thing that we have to take into account. And the second, which I think it's also important, is that we know that in many countries of the European Union, in the next 10, 20 years, we will need part of these people. We will need also having workers coming from external, from third countries, because our societies already now are unable to cover all the different parts of our labor market. So at some point, there must be a kind of win-win situation. But we have to organize this in a right way. We have to avoid that people risk their lives to enter into the European Union. We have to show this solidarity in a, let's say, in an orderly manner. There is a migration policy in some other countries in the world. It works. What we need now is to transform the national migration policies of the different member states in one real European one, because one single country cannot cope with this kind of situations.
Migration, war in Ukraine, pandemic, everything that comes with Fit for 55. Is there time for regular legislation also in the European Parliament.
Yes, of course, there are many other laws which are adopted here every time that there is a plenary session. Of course, the media are always focusing, I would say, in the most important ones, but in parallel, this is a house which is able to adopt dozens of legislative pieces during 1 year, and all of them, of course, trying to get more benefit for citizens, which, by the way, it's, I would say, it's even more important now that we are closer and closer to the next European elections.
Here at BEU, we've focused on each piece of legislation. We've discussed about the mobility package, for example, also, or about things that are changing on the labor market. So a lot of things are done here in the European Parliament. As you mentioned the elections.
Let me mention two more. One
Yes.
is the access of women to the boards of companies. It's a very important one because it's a way to change many other things. And also the minimum wage, the possibility to align the money that people in necessity can receive in the different member states of the European Union.
You've mentioned elections, and we have to underline the fact that 2023 is the year that is preparing the European elections. In a period when the European institutions are weakened due to some bad decisions, maybe, or are stronger due to some other very good ones. If we take the balance, how are we in the year before the elections?
We, of course, have still to see what will happen in the next 1.5 years. But if the elections would be next week, I would say that the European Union arrives to these elections in a more solid way than 5 years ago, because during this legislature we have been able to show complete unity in front of the United Kingdom during all the negotiation of a Brexit. This was a risky time, but the European Union was successful. We, of course, think we proved the added value of the Union for citizens during the COVID times of the pandemic. It's the European Union which was able to put into place this vaccination campaign for more than almost 500 million citizens of the European Union at the same time and in the same way. There is also a lot of unity around Ukraine and defending and protecting and helping Ukraine in this war provoked by Russia. Many people thought that Russia would be able to divide the European Union, to break the unanimity, and until now it doesn't happen. It didn't happen. So I think that we can prove to the European citizens the real value of the European Union, and this will be very important, of course, to convince them about the interest and the necessity to go and vote during the next European elections.
It was a perfect recap, let's say, of the most important things that the European Union have done during the last mandate, and I'm thanking you for this good conversation, good discussion that will let's say, give the start of a new season for our talk show for BEU, discovering together with the members of the European Parliament what are the main actions taken here and that are going to be put into place in the member states. Thank you so much.
Let's hope. Thank you very much. And of course, Happy New Year to all the Romanian citizens, Romanian European citizens.
And also for those in Spain and in the whole European Union. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Iar vouă celor de acasă vă spun să rămâneți pe Antena 3 CNN și anul acesta la BEU o să avem cele mai importante informații din zona de afaceri europene. Cu bine și sănătoși să fim!